This is a strategic scenario. Based on publicly available naval doctrine, EOD operations, and concealed Iranian weapon systems, this video reconstructs how a routine underwater inspection could uncover one of the most dangerous threats ever positioned near a U.S. carrier strike group. 1 buoy, 1 diver, 34 minutes. In this scenario, a U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal diver, a specialist with 5 years of underwater bomb disposal experience, drops into the water beside an oil industry navigation buoy 14 nautical miles south of the Strait of Hormuz. The buoy is yellow, International Maritime markings, listed in the Regional Navigation Database as belonging to a small Emirati offshore services company. Routine inspection, the kind of job EOD divers do once a week. What he finds 11 meters below the surface is not a navigation buoy. It is an Iranian anti-ship missile system, 2 cruise missiles, a satellite communications uplink, a pressure release hatch designed to vent in 7 seconds, and a firing solution already loaded for a target 14 nautical miles to the north. 34 minutes from his first descent to the moment USS Gerald Ford would have been inside the missile envelope. 34 minutes, 1 diver, 1 buoy, 1 truth. Petty Officer First Class James Calder had been a U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal diver for 5 years. 2 of those years deployed to the Persian Gulf with EOD Mobile Unit 5. He had certified on disposal of underwater IEDs, limpet mines, free-floating explosives, and the kinds of improvised weapons Iran has been positioning along the Strait of Hormuz for the past 2 decades. Calder was good at his job. He was also, by his own admission, paranoid about his job. EOD divers who are not paranoid do not stay alive in the Persian Gulf. His equipment on the morning of the inspection was standard: the Mk-16 closed-circuit rebreather, a U.S. Navy combat dive system manufactured by Carlton Life Support Technologies, with no surface bubbles allowing covert approach to a contact. A tactical dive mask with full face seal, a tritium-illuminated dive computer, and an underwater non-magnetic toolkit specifically designed not to trigger magnetic influence mines. He also carried something most EOD divers do not on a routine buoy check: a backup acoustic transponder. Calder had personally pinned for the backup transponder for 3 months before his squadron approved it as standard kit. Acoustic transponders are heavy, expensive, and rarely needed. On this morning, the backup transponder was the only thing that would get him back to USS Gerald Ford alive. The inspection assignment was issued at 0547, routine. The Combined Maritime Forces Task Group operating in the Strait of Hormuz had requested EOD verification on 3 offshore navigation buoys reported by commercial vessels as drifting slightly off station. Possible mooring failure during recent weather. Calder's RHIB launched from USS Stockdale, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer assigned to Outer Carrier Strike Group screening duty. Buoy number 2 on his list was registered in regional databases as Marine Point Buoy 4A, operated by an Emirati offshore services company called Gulf MarineNav. Gulf MarineNav did not exist. Calder's pre-dive checklist included one step that bored most EOD divers: verification of buoy ownership against the Regional Commercial Registry. Calder did it anyway. The registry showed Gulf MarineNav had been incorporated in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates 14 months earlier. Single owner, single registered office address, 12 buoys deployed across the Strait of Hormuz approaches. 12 buoys, all deployed in the previous 6 months. All in positions that, when Calder pulled out his tactical chart and plotted them, formed a perfect arc around the carrier strike group's standard transit channel. 12 buoys forming a 14 nautical mile arc around USS Gerald Ford's projected position. Calder called his EOD officer at 0712. He requested intelligence verification on Gulf MarineNav before the dive. The officer pushed back. The dive was routine, the request was unusual, and the buoys had been on station for 6 months without incident. Calder made the dive anyway. He also asked Naval Criminal Investigative Service to pull the registered office address for Gulf MarineNav while he was in the water. NCIS got back to him 47 minutes later. The The registered office address in Sharjah was a vacant shop unit that had been empty for 3 years. Gulf MarineNav had no employees, no vessels, no equipment, and no commercial activity of any kind. By that time, Calder was already 11 meters below the surface, looking at something that should not have been there. Here is the pattern Calder identified before his dive, and why every other inspection team had missed it. 12 navigation buoys positioned across the Strait of Hormuz approaches over a 6-month period. Each one registered to a different small commercial company. Each one inspected and approved by regional maritime authorities. Each one within the legal limits for offshore navigation aids. Individually, every buoy was unremarkable. Plotted on a standard maritime chart, the buoys looked random. 12 dots scattered across busy commercial waters. Plotted on a U.S. Navy tactical chart that showed the carrier strike group's projected transit positions over the past 90 days, the dots formed a different picture. The 12 buoys traced a precise arc 14 nautical miles from where USS Gerald Ford spent most of her time on station. Each buoy was equidistant. Each buoy was within the range envelope of a NOR derivative anti-ship cruise missile. Each buoy had an unobstructed line of sight to the carrier's most common operating area. 12 buoys, 12 potential launch positions. The pattern was the operation. Calder rolled backward off the RHIB into the water at 0814. Surface visibility was approximately 12 meters. Water temperature 28 degrees Celsius. Current 1.2 knots from the north. He descended on the buoy's mooring chain, standard EOD approach. Always inspect the mounting before the device itself. The chain was steel, 28mm gauge, anchored to a concrete mooring weight resting on the seabed 47 meters below. Standard offshore navigation buoy installation. The chain itself was normal. The concrete mooring weight was normal. The mooring depth was normal. The underside of the buoy was not normal. A standard offshore navigation buoy has a simple undersurface structure, ballast weight, a single battery compartment, and a mooring attachment point. Nothing else. There is no reason for anything else. The underside of Marine Point Buoy 4A had 2 pressure-rated cylindrical tubes mounted vertically, each approximately 5.8 meters in length and 533 millimeters in diameter. Each tube was sealed at the upper end with a hatch fitted with what Calder recognized at a depth of 11 meters with limited visibility as a hydraulic pressure release mechanism. The dimensions matched the standard launch tube specifications for a NOR-class anti-ship cruise missile. Each tube was protected by an outer shell painted yellow to match the rest of the buoy's exterior. From the surface, the buoy looked exactly like the 11 other buoys Calder had on his inspection list. From below, once you knew what you were looking for, it looked like a 2-tube vertical launch system. Calder did not touch the launch tubes. He did not touch the buoy. He did not surface immediately, because surfacing immediately on the buoy's own RHIB would alert anyone monitoring the buoy via satellite that it had been compromised. He swam 30 meters laterally underwater, surfaced quietly outside the buoy's likely visual surveillance arc, and reached the backup acoustic transponder he had brought. Then he transmitted 4 characters to USS Stockdale. VAMP, Vampire. US Navy Brevity Code, Anti-Ship Missile Threat. Commander David Reyes had been the commanding officer of USS Stockdale for 11 months. He read Calder's 4-character transmission, asked the question every commanding officer in his position is trained to ask, "Is this confirmed?" and received the only answer Calder had time to give.
Visual identification by certified EOD operator.
Reyes did not wait for further verification. He activated the Vampire procedure at 0833. USS Gerald Ford received the alert 38 seconds later. The carrier's commanding officer ordered an immediate course alteration of 90 degrees away from the buoy's bearing, increased the strike group's defensive readiness to general quarters, and brought the AN/SPY 6 radar online at maximum power output, accepting the operational signature cost of revealing the strike group's full electromagnetic emissions to anyone in the region monitoring her. Within 7 minutes of Calder's transmission, Every Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in the strike group had spun up Standard Missile-6 interceptors in their Mark 41 vertical launch system cells. 2 Boeing P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar, were vectored to provide overhead intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance coverage. A U.S. Navy Sea Air Land Team, Naval Special Warfare Group 3 operators on board USS Stockdale, was prepared for direct action against the buoy if Iranian launch indicators were observed. None of those steps would have mattered if the buoy had launched first. Standard Iranian anti-ship cruise missile flight time from a launch position 14 nautical miles south of USS Gerald Ford, approximately 47 seconds at low-altitude sea-skimming profile. Calder had given the strike group 7 minutes of warning. In the missile defense business, 7 minutes is forever. Here is the 34-minute timeline that decided everything. 0712. Calder requests intelligence verification on Gulf MarineNav. Initially denied. 0759. NCIS confirms Gulf MarineNav does not exist as a real company. 0814. Calder enters the water on routine buoy inspection. 0828. Visual identification of vertical launch tubes on underside of buoy. 0831. Calder lateral swim to evade buoy surveillance. 0833. Vampire transmission to USS Stockdale. 0834. Commander Reyes activates Vampire procedure. 0834 plus 38 seconds. USS Gerald Ford alerted. 0836. Carrier executes 90-degree emergency course change. 0840. SM-6 interceptors spun up across the strike group. 0846. USS Gerald Ford crosses outside the buoy's missile envelope. Total time from Calder's dive to carrier safety, 34 minutes. The buoy was retrieved intact 6 hours later by a Navy salvage team. The 2 Nor-derivative cruise missiles inside were exactly what Calder had identified. The firing solution loaded into the satellite communications uplink was for the carrier's projected position at 0911 that morning, 25 minutes after Calder surfaced. Iran could not announce what had happened, acknowledging that 12 buoys positioned over 6 months, each one disguised as commercial offshore navigation equipment, had been concealing a coordinated anti-ship cruise missile launch network around a U.S. carrier strike group would have meant acknowledging that the operation existed, that the operation had been discovered by one diver on a routine inspection, that every Iranian buoy-launched missile system currently positioned across other choke points, the Bab el-Mandeb, the entrance to the Persian Gulf, possibly the Eastern Mediterranean, was now compromised because every nation in the region would inspect every navigation buoy from that point forward. So Iran said nothing. Marine Point Buoy 4A was quietly recovered by U.S. Navy salvage divers 6 hours after Calder's transmission. The 2 Nor-derivative cruise missiles were transported to a combined maritime forces facility in Bahrain for technical exploitation. The other 11 buoys identified by Calder's pattern analysis were inspected over the following 72 hours. 3 of them contained the same launch systems. 8 of them contained nothing but ballast and navigation electronics, decoys positioned to make the active launchers harder to identify. 4 cruise missiles total, each capable of striking USS Gerald Ford. None of them ever launched. Petty Officer First Class James Calder returned to USS Stockdale at 13:27 that afternoon. He completed an 8-hour debriefing. He flew his next routine inspection 41 hours later. He received a quiet commendation that will not be declassified for at least 20 years. On the official record, the operation that day is listed as routine EOD verification, no anomalies. That is the only official record there is. 3 conclusions from this scenario. First, pattern recognition is the only defense against concealment operations of this scale. No single buoy was suspicious. No single launch tube would have been noticed by a casual surface inspection. The operation was visible only when 12 apparently unrelated installations were plotted against the operational positions of an American carrier. Calder did that plotting because he was paranoid. The intelligence systems above him did not, because they were not. Second, EOD divers are the last layer of physical inspection between a hidden weapon and the asset it is aimed at. The Navy keeps roughly 2,000 EOD operators on active duty across all branches. Each one is trained to look at infrastructure and ask whether the infrastructure is what it claims to be. On most days, that question is theoretical. On the day it is not, the entire strike group depends on the answer. Third, concealment as an operational concept is increasingly the standard. Containers that are missile launchers, buoys that are missile launchers, fishing vessels that are surveillance platforms. The pattern is the operation. Pirates can pick the wrong ship, Iran can position the wrong buoy, and on a quiet morning in the Persian Gulf, one paranoid EOD diver can read the chart correctly.